Today on the podcast, I'm chatting with Steve Miller, not the space cowboy, but the Rutgers University professor and director of media studies. Listen in to learn what makes music so special to Professor Miller. Welcome to the Eat, Sleep, Breathe Music podcast, where we talk all things music. I'm your host, Jeanette Kinzel, music blogger and enthusiast. Let's get started with today's episode. Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. If you want to introduce yourself.
Let's start with the first thing. Hi, Steve Miller. I'm your former professor. I'm director of undergraduate studies for the Rutgers University Department of Journalism and Media Studies. But one of the things that I teach is I teach television and broadcast journalism, but also I'm on the radio council for WRSU FM radio, which is a college radio station, and just a music junkie. So one of the things that got me when we first started communicating about this was the whole title about Eat, Sleep, Breathe Music. And that's what it's about.
Yeah.
I'm
getting chills.
What this whole thing, right. But that's what this whole thing is about, this podcast, and it's what it should be about. Because everybody as I wrote this to you, everybody marches to a tune and a beat in their head. Their whole lives have a rhythm to it, just like a song. And the songs that we sing are the songs that we feel, and the music that's in our heads just continuously change based on our mood. And so, there's some mornings we wake up and it's like my daughters love this and my wife loves this. My wife's mother used to come in and they were asleep and wake them up singing "Oh, It's a Beautiful Morning" from the musical Oklahoma. She was a terrible singer. She did it, and she passed away in 2017. But my daughters will tell you one of their greatest memories is grandma coming in and singing to them.
Aww,
but that's what it's about. It's about how you feel at that point. Is it going? Am I in a Chicago mood? Does anybody know what time it is? Does anybody really care? Are we in a contemplative mood, like In My Life by the Beatles? There are places I remember all my life, though some have changed, some forever, not for better, and all that. Is it a day when we want a Led Zeppelin tune in our heads, where it's, a whole lot of love, but it's not that, or Stairway to Heaven? Or is it, a day when, and I shared this with you, when my daughter got married, I wrote the lyrics to the song that we danced to. And how do you feel about it? But that's what we do, whether we realize it or not. And yes, you hear this thing about, we march to a beat of a different drum or that type of thing. But that's a different drum that's every day. And whether we know it or not, music is the backbone and the soundtrack of our lives. And it's something we should be all be talking about. It's something we all should be experiencing. It's also some things that we should all be getting a hold of. And especially, you were talking to me before about, this is what I'm doing during the pandemic. Well, these are the times when we really need music the most.
So
to keep us in line, to keep us real. And whether we realize it or not, we do this anyway. So I'll give you an example. When I was an undergraduate at Rutgers, before I take an exam, a big exam, and I'd get nervous, I would put on my headphones and listen to a song called For a Dancer by Jackson Browne. And what I would do is I would focus in on the fiddle in it. But it's not your usual fiddle where it's, the honky tonk breakdown or Rocky Mountain breakdown or something like that. It's this nice, soothing, almost violin-like fiddle to it. And you listen to it. And what I've found is it becomes almost like meditation.
Yeah. That
if you focus in on one instrument or one beat, it's like in a meditation when you're focusing in on your breathing.
Definitely.
And it would calm me down. It would get me focused. This is also why if you read interviews with ball players, they'll say, I listen to such and such a thing to get me psyched up. Or, relief pitchers in baseball will come in to Enter Sandman by Metallica.
Yeah.
And it's going to get me psyched up. And yet people do that. So that's what this is to me, when you said, eat, sleep, breathe music, that's what it's about.
No, Totally. I mean, I feel the same way. Like I've for as long as I remember, I've always had music in my life. Like I think it had a lot to do. I had two older sisters, so I think I was lucky that they had musical influence on me. Because I mean, who knows if I would have gotten in music as much, but and I remember going to a concert when I was 14, and that was like life changing. And it's amazing how much music can touch you and just kind of like, change your mood, lift your spirit, help you when you're in a pandemic. Like it's.
I found that very interesting because I have an older brother, and he really didn't influence me with his music. And in fact, there are times when he'll send me something and say, "Oh, listen to this." He loves Government Mule. He absolutely he's this year he was just so depressed because usually I think every year on the 30th and 31st of December, Government Mule is playing in Philadelphia. And he goes to the concert, and obviously this year he wasn't able to do it. But, and I could tell that his mood changed. Also, I haven't really been able to see him during the pandemic. I've seen him once in person, and we had to keep, of course, your tendency is to, hey, how you doing, man? But you can't do anything. And it's like, and you say to yourself, wait, that's my brother. Why can't I, anyway. But he listens to that type of stuff. I mean, I used to say my influences were A, B, C, D, E, F. So he grew up, he's 3 years older than me. And so this, by the way, to show you how big an influence music is on my life, this coming year, I'm having my Sgt. Pepper birthday. I'm going to be 64. But my point is I'm calling it my Sgt. Pepper birthday. So I grew up at a time that everybody waxes nostalgic about in terms of music. Mm-hmm. I still remember being on a day camp bus, when we would change Beatle lyrics around because it was 1964 when the Beatles had just come out. I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan in February 9th, 1964. But instead of "She was just 17," we would sing, "Well, she was just 99 and she looked like Frankenstein," that type of stuff. That's how kids will do. But but I was listening to music all the way back then, and grew up with the Beatles, the Stones. As you move forward, and you remember sitting in my class, and I would talk about AM radio, and then all of a sudden Freeform FM came in 67. Yeah. So, but that was my life, and I lived through it. And then we got to Freeform FM, where you started getting the 18-minute songs like Iron Butterflies In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida and Tommy the Who, talking about the Who. And then into the 70s, then you had the clash between they started off with the folk singers like James Taylor, Joni Mitchell, Linda Ronstadt. And then it went to LA California Rock at the same time. You had the hair bands like Bon Jovi, but LA California Rock was started off with the Byrds in 64 and then all the way to the Eagles and Poco and things like that. So that's, played part of my life. But it also influences what I do today because this is what I get to lecture about. Mm-hmm. It's fun. It's great. Yeah. So I get up there and, the kids, the students today, and even went back in your day, which is not so long ago. And I get up there and say, yeah, this was a song. And they're like, what are you doing? But then everybody said, well, what do you think about music today? And then you talk about that. And so you juxtapose it together. And it's a very interesting thing. But go back a minute. My grandfather was in vaudeville. I don't know if you remember that from the lecture, but because that's so long ago since you took it. Yes. My grandfather was in vaudeville. He was a song plugger back. He was born in 1891. So when he was old enough, about the 19 teens, what he would do, and the way that it worked back then was, a writer would write a song for a publishing company, and in order to sell it, you had to go from artist to artist to artist in person and get them to sing the song, or go to a sheet music publisher to get them to publish it, because people would then buy the sheet music and play on the piano because there was no radio. Wow. It wasn't until the 1920s when radio really started hitting. And really, it wasn't until Sarnoff, here comes the lecture again. Sarnoff in 2026 and Paley in 27 created the broadcast networks that you really started to have everything take off. But you're talking we have a picture of my grandfather with a guy named Rudy Valley, who was the Frank Sinatra, Elvis Presley, Beatles, Michael Jackson of the 1920s.
Mm-hmm.
He made his money singing, but he didn't have a microphone. If you remember the cheerleaders' megaphones, those big, long cylindrical thing, that was the microphone they used on stage.
Oh, wow.
So in addition, and that was also when 78 RPM records were coming out and people were doing it. Keep something in mind. We live in an age when technology has changed everything. I mean, you grew up, in 2004, you got your first iPod, it killed the CD.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And because then you started MP3, MP4, and now everything's streaming, which killed the MP, and so forth. But things are changing very rapidly. Edison invented the first cylinder with Mary Had a Little Lamb in the 1870s.
Yeah.
Okay. Records really didn't come about till about 20, 25 years later. And they were 78s. And then they didn't have a real place to play them out to a mass audience till the 1920s. So you're talking 50 years. Here today, oh, wait, they just changed technology right now. Right. So my history, my background isn't just with, I love music. It's my background is I've got this from my grandfather who did that, whose cousin published Tiptoe Through the Tulips. I don't know if you ever heard that song. It was remade in 1968 as a novelty song by a guy named Tiny Tim, who sang in a falsetto voice and it was a sensation for about 5 minutes, in the national scene. But his cousin was in the music business, music publisher. My grandfather was in vaudeville. Then he was a song plugger. Then he was a music publisher. Then he was a union rep. In fact, here on the wall, if you see behind me, there's a picture with there's two pictures over one thing under it. Yeah. The thing under it is my grandfather's certificate from ASCAP. That he's a lawyer member of the American Association of Music Publishers and stuff.
Oh, neat.
Right. So this is the family business. That's the business side of music. That's the technology side. And it's something that we grew up with. I throw lyrics into everything I do. I quote things. My favorite all-time show from TV, which is, I'm an idiot, is The Monkees.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that's eat, breathe, sleep, music. And I'll give you one last thing. My granddaughter is 6 weeks old, and she, the last 2 weekends, my wife and I have taken care of her, and she'll start crying, and all I'll do is I'll pick her up and I'll just start singing Harry Chapin songs to her, and calms her down like crazy. And so you pass the music along too.
Mm-hmm. No, it's great. It's great to have that music passed down.
Yeah. And it's different. The other thing, going back to what you do is it's the genre of music you listen to, not just the type. There's some days I'm a Dixie chick type of mood. Chick type of mood. Sorry, forgot. Old name. They are now the Chicks.
Oh.
Right. Because they don't want Dixie associated, which is great. The newest album was really good. But also, I sometimes I'm in that mood. Sometimes I'm in the mood to listen to, if I want to do country. Steve Martin, the comedian, has had some really good albums out. And in fact, he paired with, he had two good albums with, I'm blanking on her name, but she's Paul Simon's wife. And it's really good stuff. In fact, I've got I'm talking to you, I'll call that up. And sometimes I'm in a Crosby, Stills and Nash mood. Sometimes I'm in a Beatles mood, a Monkees mood. There's just everything. And it's just like the phase, the days and the phase of the moon. Edie Brickell, sorry. So these are all a really good thing. And it's magic. It's like you said before, I'm getting chills thinking about, listen to this.
Yeah.
A really good song will give you chills. A really good song will bring you to a place in time. that is either wonderful or not. Music can get you through. When my father was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, he was in New York and I was, in New Jersey back in 2003. What got me through was George Harrison's album Brainwashed, and also George Harrison's All Things Must Pass. And these songs have meaning for you, and there's nothing that can replace it. I will play Dan Fogelberg's album Captured Angel, and I'm back dating my first love back in 1974 and 75. There's a magic to it, and you can ride the notes, ride the wave to that place in time, and it can take you out of the circumstances that you're in.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I had read this one book, and the name escapes me, but it was really cool. It was just talking about how music can, physically affect the way your brain works. And I think that's also why, you were talking before about the meditation aspect. I think that's also, why, because there's a lot of, it's like the beats and the thing. It's amazing how music can really not maybe a little bit hypnotize you, and also kind of help you kind of shift your mind and focus and everything. It's amazing. It's great.
Well, it's interesting, and it doesn't have to have words. How many times have you seen those mind-clearing, what used to be called New Age? And it's not just music, that music itself where there's an instrument. It's waterfalls. Mm-hmm. It's just the sound of waves. But that also in and of itself has a rhythm. Keep in mind, your heart has a rhythm. Your heart has a beat. People who are hearing impaired don't hear music, but if you get them on the dance floor, they can feel the beat from the speakers coming through the floor, and they get the rhythm and the vibrations, and there's a music to that too.
Yeah.
There's a magic. The only word I can say is magic.
No, definitely.
And I don't mean the song from 1975 by the Group Pilot, which is or Do You Believe in Magic by the Loving Spoonful. There is a magic to music, even if it's bad music.
Yeah.
That just envelops you, it envelops your mind, it envelops your heart, envelops your soul, and it makes your toes tingle. And your fingers want to move. And, you've seen these comedy, I just want to feel the beat. Hold it. Oh, every time I hear the beat, and then you see the food go boom, 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 boom. And, I get this rhythm in my head. And when you write, whatever it is you write, you get a rhythm, and you get a rhythm going. There you go. It's music. And music encompasses everything.
Definitely does. What do you like? Do you find that you get drawn more to melodies or lyrics? Like, what do you listen to more when you're listening to music? Do you listen to everything, or is there one that you pay more attention to? I love listening to lyrics. I write lyrics. They're a way to express. Lyrics are a great way to rid yourself of problems. So. I remember when I first got married back in 1984, we moved up to Boston, and my wife had to travel a lot for her job. And so, I remember writing things about it, so like, I don't care what you say, I just can't make it alone. I don't want to go on. If I must stay here on my own, but the days are long and my nights are cold and my bed feels like a jail. I can't live with the pain. I can't take it anymore. Right. Or I broke up. I was feeling the woman I was dating before I met my wife. I was, it ended, I'll say it ended badly in a way, but, I remember writing, it's so sad it's so sad to see how time changes feeling, but things occur that you don't expect. And the things, what was it? The things you knew take another course, of course, and the candle in the window's blown out, and the light upon the table is dim, and the beat of my heart can't be heard
anymore over the sound of your voice, which doesn't leave me any choice. No, it doesn't leave me any choice but the door. Right? So you end up writing these things and the lyrics come out. And one of the things that's gotten lost in an era with electronic instruments, and I'm not saying electronic music, but I'm saying where there are groups that now use machines instead of drummers.
Yeah.
They use instead of using, because of the expense, you don't hire orchestras anymore. What you do is use synthesized music. But also in the lab with an overemphasis of volume on songs, lyrics seem to have gotten lost a lot of times. Lyrics with a lot of meaning, and it's the lyrics that really hit you are the ones that are the things that really touch your soul. You can have a beautiful melody, and that'll touch your soul too. But a lyric, and I guess this also comes from why I'm in journalism, and I do video, and if you go back to when you were in television reporting, I had you watch all those shows, and I said, okay, what's more important to you? Is it the video, or the voiceover, the words, the audio or the video?
Yeah.
And most people in this generation will say, oh, it's videos, it's important. And even though I'm a video guy and a video person, videographer, and do television, to me it's the words, because a picture can paint 1,000 words, but the question is, what are those words?
Yeah.
So you have to have. So I've always been that way, and it's how can you beat a Lennon McCartney lyric, or something that has meaning to you. So what just pick almost any song. I'll say from the Beatles. I said in my life before, there are places I remember all my life. Some have changed, some are forever, not for better. Some are gone and some remain. I mean, how can you beat that? It's just amazing how it all touches your soul. In fact, at this point in my life, most times I love things stripped down to just a guitar or a piano and the lyric. So if you hear, there used to be the MTV Unplugged.
Yeah.
And I miss those because it was, so if you listen to Layla, the song Layla by Gentle and Dominoes, right? And you hear it, right? But then you listen to it from the MTV Unplugged, and it's a much different tune, and it's much more understandable lyric, and it's just got a nicer backbeat. The other thing that's always interesting is when you hear somebody doing something different than you expect them to, or playing an instrument that expect. I mentioned George Harrison's album Brainwashed. Now everybody knows George Harrison from the Beatles and playing electric guitar, and especially his very distinctive slide guitar. But his main instrument on Brainwashed is the ukulele.
Oh.
So and when he's doing this, he played a song on there that's called The Devil in Deep Blue Sea, which was written by a guy named Harold Arlen. And it's got that old type of sound, behind it, with almost a 30s, 40s sound, where you almost expect them to be like Rudy Valley going, I still love you, that type of thing, right? And he's got a tuba on it, but you hear a ukulele. That led me to remember that Harold Arlen also wrote a song called Somewhere Over the Rainbow.
Oh.
Now, the interesting thing I've discovered since then that I should have known is Arlen wrote Somewhere Over the Rainbow about what was going on with the Holocaust. And he was Jewish. And it's his thing about, because he had escaped from Germany.
Mm-hmm.
So somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue. And if you listen to the lyrics, that's what it's about.
Oh, wow.
It's about, escaping the Holocaust and what was going on in Europe. If you Google it online after we're done, And just look at that.
Oh,
But again, he's the guy who wrote this. And George Harrison's doing a song by Harold Arlen. So in 2003, while he's, he has his cancer, and just go through all this stuff. It's just like, okay. But that's what, again, going back to what music's about. I mentioned I wrote this song for my daughter for her wedding. And, I shared that with you. And, on such a momentous occasion, how do you write it? Well, it just came to me that, what an image of her, and the music was written by one of our alums, another of our former students, and his music writing partner. And they did some stuff with it, and I was very fortunate in that he first recorded it and didn't like it, and he had some friends in Nashville, sent it down there, and they re-recorded a lot of it in the studio down there with a singer from down there, and we were able to use it at the wedding, surprise her at the wedding. But again, it's a way of expressing yourself, a way of getting it out.
Yeah.
One last thing, you asked me about lyrics in that. How many people do you know that just write journals? They keep diaries.
Yeah.
People keep journals, which, most times you think, you're a 12-year-old and you're keeping a diary.
Yeah.
But think about what, people put in those journals, and what's the difference between that and writing lyrics to express yourself?
Yeah.
Because that's what I used to do.
Thing. Yeah.
That's what I used to do. In fact, I took creative writing when I was in college, and I still have the book. And she said, keep a diary. And in the diary would, instead of writing out most of the stuff in prose, I would write out in lyrics.
Cool.
And it's no different, or writing poetry. Look at the woman who was magnificent at the inauguration, what she expressed. What are some of the songs that are coming out that people are using to express themselves? And think about the lyrics that are quite, Bob Dylan won the Nobel Prize for Literature for his lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a music, lyrics, songs, why do they construct songs in that way? Why do they put the trumpet there? Or, can you really make a guitar sound like it's a crying baby? Yes, you can. It's funny. There were only 8 notes, the old saying about there are only 8 notes. It's what you do with them that matters. And it's funny. I'll give you an example of how music influences different people in different ways. And some people, it's funny, some artists are impactful on you, some artists aren't. I got to college in 1975, and that's exactly the time that Born to Run came out.
Yeah.
And all these people all over the place. And to this day, it's like all these people who I went to college with, Springsteen's great. Springsteen never got to me. I'm one of the few people from New Jersey, I guess, who's like, so what? To me, again, Bruce, and this might sound anathema, but to me, it's his chords are this, and are just 1, 4, 5 chords, just like everybody else. They're very simple. And in fact, I thought before Born to Run, his music was better because of David Sanchez on the piano, and I thought he was better for that. But then after that, to me, it becomes redundant and commercial and sounds the same all the time. Whereas, I think the other thing that really impacted me, I was a Dylan guy. Mm-hmm. People were saying, Springsteen's the new Dylan. And I'm like, nobody can Dylan. But, again, with Dylan, though, look what somebody did back in the 60s, with simple 1, 4, 5 chords. And but the lyrics were magnificent. And most people would say on both Springsteen and Dylan, their voices aren't that good. Mm-hmm. But now we've come to accept it. And in fact, around that time, you had a lot of people who had bad voices, a lot of men specifically, because of misogynism in the industry. You can't have a woman who has a bad voice. But you have Dylan, you had Springsteen, but you also had a guy named Steve Forbert, who really I thought it was a terrible voice. He had this one song, and he went, "Meet me in the middle of the day, let me hear you say everything's okay." All right, all that. And Bob Seger really never had that strong a voice either, but the lyrics and the songs were carried it. Same, and you could say the same thing for Springsteen. Mm-hmm. In fact, I liked Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes better than I liked Springsteen, because I thought that Southside Johnny's voice was magnificent. But again, but that's taste and that's music and the way people are. But, what is it that draws people to songs? What is it music? It's time, it's place, it's how they get touched in their soul.
Exactly.
And, when, you grew up in, the 90s and 2000s, my daughter is, my older daughter is 33, and I'll never forget her, when she really started finding out about music, there were certain songs and certain groups that she was listening to. I mean, I think you're probably, when you were 10 or 11, you graduated what year again?
The college or high school?
College.
2004.
Okay, 2004. All right, so you grew up in the 90s,
yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Right, so you're a pre-boy band era.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was New Kids on the Block. I feel like I grew up that was another boy band we were obsessed with.
Right.
But, so.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So we have to blame you for Marky Mark. Anyway, right. But you had that, and what was it? New Edition was the other one.
Yeah. They were like I feel like they were like the godfathers of the boy bands.
Right. So right. But you had all these groups. So you had all these boy bands and things like that. But you grew up though at a time, Alanis Morissette.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And Green Day,
Nirvana, and Pearl Jam,
right.
all those.
Pearl Jam, right. And Eddie Vedder. Right. But so you had all that type of, so that's what influences you, and that's also and it's, I'm going to say post Nirvana, right? Because I think Cobain had passed away by that point.
Yeah. I think I was
right. So Foo Fighters had just started out.
Yeah.
Foo Fighters has been in business for 25 years.
Yeah.
And now we can see that the real power behind Nirvana was really Dave Grohl.
Yeah.
So that's what hit you at that time. But if you go back, I'm trying to think what calm songs were around. What was on top 40. Why was it that were you listening to Z100? And top 40, or we're listening to, alt rock, and the way what you listen to now impacts that, because music is forever. Yeah. And what a lot of people find is what you were listening to, why is, you probably go, Mom, Dad, why are you still listening to Bobby Goldsboro sing Honey from 1968? And why did you force me to listen to a song called Horse with No Name? Right? But that's because, the music, and Grandma and Grandpa were listening to Benny Goodman or Elvis or whatever, or Bing Crosby, whatever, because that's forever. But that's what music is. Yeah. It's wonderful.
It's interesting too how some people don't get into music. They don't see it the same way.
I think a lot of that's similar to everything else. Why is it that you get two children, same family, one's into sports, one's not.
True.
One's into music, one's not.
Yeah.
One's into politics, one's not. It's place, time, everything. My brother is 3 years older than me. He went through experiences that I didn't go through. He lived a life that's different from mine. Mm-hmm. So, he'll remember things that I don't. Yeah. And so it's a matter of, also what's the environment you're in? So who are you hanging out with? You also may have been hanging out with people who are into music. They may not have. Yeah. Their parents, what type of home life are they? I mean, it always appalled me, and it shouldn't appall me, but it did, that there were people who were told that you're not allowed to listen to music in your house because their parents, because of their upbringing, there are certain religions that don't believe in music. That is the devil's workshop. Yeah. Or I remember being 8 years old or 9 years old around the time that John Lennon said that the Beatles are more popular than Jesus, and people burning their records, and crushing their records down south, and I never understood that. But then again, I had this influence in my life. Yeah. My mother grew up in a very political home. My father had, the background with his father being in vaudeville. And here I am. I'm the amalgam. My father, I'll go back to sports. My father was a Brooklyn Dodger fan. His father was a Yankee fan, and my mother's father was a New York Giant, baseball Giant fan. So they were battling while I was growing up about what, those teams. And so you had that. So now you can see who I am, because, you and I have had millions of conversations over the years, back when you were in school about this stuff. But you get formed by the world around you. And there are people who don't listen to music because of whatever reason. And it's, that's fine. But I will argue to them that they too have a musical rhythm to their lives that just isn't conscious of the music that they're interested in.
I like that thought of it, because I never thought about that in that way. Because I think you just see what you're into when you're into music, and not that it's weird not being into music, but it's just different.
It's funny. Whether we realize it or not, we all operate in a vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
It's, okay, I don't understand, for example, how my son-in-law is not into sports. It's like, you got to be into sport. He's into, he's a comic collector.
Okay.
Aside from his job, and he loves Marvel, he loves DC, he loves all that. And what? But everybody's got their own thing.
Yeah.
You and I, okay, I'll give you another song lyric written by Mike Nesmith of the Monkees, became a hit for Linda Ronstadt and the Stone Ponies in 1967. You and I march to a beat of a different drum. Oh, can't you tell by the way I run every time you make eyes at me? Whoa. But it's you and I march to a beat of a different drum. We all march to a beat of a different drum. And the question is, do we want everybody to be in the same drum and walk in lockstep? And my answer is no.
Yeah.
And because we don't march to the same drummer, that's why you can get Beyonce, Earth, Wind, and Fire, Stevie Nicks, Beatles, Bon Jovi, Springsteen. Think about all the different singers who are out there. I admire rap music, and rap music is a descendant of talking blues from the 1920s and 30s, which means a descendant of Robert Johnson and all those people. And even whether they realize or not, Bob Dylan did talking blues from the folk circuit. I don't listen to rap music, but that's why you have it, is because there were people back then who did talking blues. Dylan did a song called Bob Dylan's 115th Dream, which started out, well, I was riding down the Mayflower, so I found some land. It's like, he starts talking. It's like, wait, what are you doing? But then he starts singing it. And, but you end up with that stuff. But that's what makes the world a wonderfully diverse place. You have diverse tastes in music. And each generation has their own touchstone. You can go, as I said before, it's Rudy Valley in the 20s, Sinatra in the 40s, Elvis in the 50s, Bing Crosby's in the 30s, Elvis in the 50s, Beatles in the 60s, Michael Jackson in the 80s, who these boy bands, and so on. The sensations that people, oh yes, I still, on my desk, on my dresser right now, my sister-in-law gave me these Beatle flags. Little flags with pictures of the Beatles. And I remember the Beatles cartoon. I was 7 when they hit the America. And I was 13 when they broke up. But they are in my life. The Monkees lasted for 2.5 years on TV, right? But they still can, but the two surviving ones, Mike and Mickey, every time they come around, I go see them. Why? Because I'm a believer. Yeah. I'm a believer in a Pleasant Valley Sunday, and and I can do their songs backward, up and down. Just like if Pearl Jam comes around, you're there.
Yeah, no, right? It's true.
And and that's this is why it's there. It's ingrained. It's in your heart. It's in your soul. It's everything you do. It's right now behind you. I've got my iTunes, with my 3,000, 4,000 songs on there, and it's and every once in a while something new comes out, and I buy that something new. But from it's it's there. I mean, I can rap on this all day and talk about this all day, but it's me. It's who I am. It's who you are.
Yeah, it's part of life. I don't know. And does your wife share the music, like love music?
She doesn't have it as much as I do. In fact, we have some disagreements because she had Carpenter's albums and Barry Manilow albums, so it was a different type of music. But I mean, we have a happy meeting at the hit 45s and things like that. So yeah.
That's nice. It's always nice to share music with someone.
Yeah, it is. So anyway, all right.
Well, thank you for coming on. This was a really great conversation.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And please let's do it again sometime soon, and keep me in the loop on everything else.
Yeah, definitely.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hope you enjoyed today's podcast. If you like what you hear, please hit the subscribe button and give us a review. If you want to find more new music, check out our other podcast episodes and our website at www.eatsleepbreathemusic.com. Thanks so much for listening to the Eat, Sleep, Breathe Music podcast. To find new music and learn more about what we do, you can check out our website at www.eatsleepbreathemusic.com.